Okay, good afternoon. Welcome back sa partnership and corporate accounting natin. And I'm still your instructor, Carmina Dongkayan. And we are now in our week 13 or lesson 13. So our topic for this week is all about the corporate formation and the shareholders equity part 1. Okay, so at the end of this lesson you should be able to describe what a corporation is and how it is constructed or is structured. Okay, number 2, enumerate and explain the attributes of a corporation. Number 3, list the advantages and disadvantages of a corporation and the incorporation requirements. Number 4, describe the different kinds of corporation and kinds of stocks as to values and rights. And lastly, explain the different components of shareholders equity. Okay, but before we start, please have your modules with you and go along with our discussion. Okay, as your basis, your have your modules with you. Okay, and let's start our discussion. Okay, so we will first define corporations. Ayan, a corporation is an artificial being. Ayan, artificial being created by operation of law, having the right of succession and the powers, attributes, and properties expressly authorized by law or incident to its existence. So that is meron yan sa Section 2 of the Corporation Code of the Philippines, ang definition ng corporation. So, we all know corporation, so hindi na yan bago sa inyo because we discussed that in your fundamentals of accounting. So, it is an artificial being, so parang tao din siya. So, created by law, created by the operation of law, having the right of succession and the powers, ayan, attributes and properties expressly authorized by law or incidents to its existence. So, that is a corporation. So, tao rin yan. Parang tao rin yung corporation because we have here the right of succession, the powers, ayan, or incidents to its existence. Ayan yung authorized. It is authorized by law because it is create siya by the operation of law. Okay, so that is under the Section 2 of the Corporation Code of the Philippines. So corporation reveals the following attributes. So when we say artificial being, tao yan, parang tao din siya. And a corporation, ayan, is a separate and distinct personality from stockholders kasi sasabi nga natin parang tao din siya. Ayan. Separate yung personality niya from the stockholders. So iba yung stockholders, iba din kay corporation. And as such, is may acquire or dispose property, ayan, incur and pay obligations, sue and be sued. So pwede din siyang makasuhan. So in other words, the firm is viewed as a separate and distinct personality from the people who own it. So, separate siya. So, iba yung nasa tao yung mga nasa tao dun sa loob ng corporation, iba siya. So iba din siya. So parang tao din na, sabi ko nga parang tao din siya. Kaya na pwedeng kasuhan, na pwedeng magbayad ng utang, na pwedeng umutang. So it is an artificial being. So number 2, we have here the legal personality. So a corporation's identity is legally created by operation of law and as such as a juridical person with rights. Ayan, sabi ko nga sa inyo, ayan, parang tao na may right din siya, may powers din siya. Okay? And number 3, right of succession. So when we say right of succession, a corporation shall exist for a period as provided in its articles until its term expires or dissolve. Ayan. Earlier for some causes or even extended in accordance with the law. So when we say right of succession, so pwedeng mamana-mana yan. Until nga parang kung palugi na lang yung company, saka lang siya magdi-dissolve, okay? Pero kapag kaya pa ng corporation na mag-operate, then mag-operate siya until sa gusto niya, okay? So kasi we have what we call the right of succession, wherein it's legal life is 50 years, and as such, kung tapos na yung 50 years, pwede niyang i-extend another 50 years, okay? And number 4, we have also the corporate ownership. So when we say corporate ownership, ayan, the interest and right over the corporation is divided into shares of stocks. Ayan, so syempre, kapag meron tayong pwedeng or dividends na pwedeng ma-divide, ayan. So it is divided into shares of or corporate ownership na divide yan, may mga stocks, ayan, may stocks na binebenta yung corporation na divide yan into shares of stocks, okay? And investors buy shares of stock to become a shareholder. Ayan, bibili siya ng stocks para maging shareholder siya, whose interest and rights in the firm is based on the numbers of shares and kind of shares na na-acquire na, syempre, okay? Number 5, limited liability. So when we say limited liability, the shareholders is liable. Ayan, the shareholder is liable to the corporate creditors, pero only to the extent of his or her obligation or contribution. So kapag 20,000 lang yung bilang isang shareholders, 20,000 pesos worth yung binili mong stocks, hanggang dun lang yung hahabulin sa'yo, okay? Hanggang dun lang yung hahabulin ng mga creditors sa'yo. So wala silang pakialam sa mga personal na pera mo, okay? Personal properties cannot be confiscated and used to pay for the corporate liabilities. Ayan, yung sinabi natin kanina, when the corporation becomes insolvent. Ayan, kung hindi na makakabayad yung corporation, hindi nila pwedeng habulin yung personal properties of the shareholders. Only to the extent in their contributions, okay? Sa binili nilang stocks lang na sila hahabulin, okay? So, unlike sa sole proprietor or partner that they have the unlimited liability. So, meaning, pwede nilang habulin kapag hindi na nakabayad yung business nila or yung business nila. Insolvent na yung kahit ibenta nila lahat ng ari-arian nila, lahat ng meron sa business na yon, insolvent pa rin sila, not enough to pay the obligation of the business. Then therefore pwede nilang habulin yung personal properties of the owner or the shareholder, yung mga yung sole proprietor or yung mga partnership. That is why ang disadvantages niya, di ba, na discuss na natin is unlimited liability. Not unlike dito sa corporation that we have the limited liability nga na sinasabi natin, okay? And number 6, we have here the transferability of interest. So when we say transferability, ayan, after shares are issued to shareholder, these shares may be transferred to other through the stock market. Ayan, so pwede nilang i-transfer, di ba, sa let's say for example sa Philippine Stock Exchange or through other brokers and investment houses, okay? Ayan, recall that the partner, ayan, cannot admitted in the partnership without the consent of all the partners. Ayan, so kapag sa partnership, hindi pwedeng i-admit ng isang partner, isang partner yung bagong tao dun sa yung gustong magi-partner. So it is in the consent of all the partners. So dito sa corporation, kapag yung shareholders natin transfer niya bigla yung stocks niya sa Philippine Stock Exchange or sa mga businessman na gustong bumili ng kanyang stocks, so pwede yun kahit hindi niya ipaalam sa mga shareholders. Okay, number 4, continued existence. So, a corporation has an unlimited life. So, sabi nga natin, its legal life is 50 years, but it is can be renewed for another 50 years. Kapag natapos naman yung 50 years, i-renew mo ulit i-renew mo ulit another 50 years. So, sabi nga natin, madidissolve lang yung isang corporation kung insolvent na siya. So, hindi na niya kayang bayaran yung sarili niya or hindi na siya makakabayad. So, yun lang yung pwedeng kung paano dissolve yung corporation na to. Okay? Or kung nagkaroon ng problema, 'di ba? So, yun lang. Pero kung still existing pa rin yung corporation, then natapos yung 50 years, another 50 years, another 50 years, another 50 years. Hanggat kaya niyang mag-operate, di ba? Okay, number 5. Ayan. Bakit iba na itong binabasa ko? Ayan, nasa advantages na pala tayo ng corporation. So, we have here okay, advantages of corporation, pero yung sinabi ko kanina na ayan, this is all about the transferability of interest, and I discussed already the continued existence. And we have here the advantages. So one of the advantages pala nung corporation is ito yung dalawang to na discuss ko na. Okay, number 1, we have here the capital. So a large amount of resources can easily be acquired by selling the shares through the investment market. Ayan, such as the Philippine Stock Exchange, where a great number of individuals and firms channel their investment. So, hindi mo dito sa corporation, hindi mo problema ang capital, kasi pwedeng madali ka lang makapag-acquire, madali kang mag-acquire ng capital dito by selling the shares of the corporation, di ba? So, through the investment, ayan, investment market such as yung Philippine Stock Exchange nga, di ba? So, hindi mo problemahin ang capital dito. So, number 2, liability of corporate creditors. So, a shareholder is limited or liable only to the extent, ayan, sabi ko nga kanina, only to the extent of their investment in the corporation. So, hindi sila pwedeng habulin sa personal na property nila. And number 3, I discussed that already, sa transferability of interest. And of course, yung number 4, continued existence. When we say continued existence, another 50 years, 50 years, 50 years, as long as kaya na pang operate. Okay? Number 5, we have here also the skilled management. Ayan, sa corporation, syempre, bilang isang malaking kumpanya, yung mga professionals na nandoon is talagang skilled sila. So, alam nila yung mga ginagawa nila, gamay nila, okay? So, hindi mo pa problemahin sa corporation yung mga empleyado na tamad. Ayan. So, dito, puro skilled management or skilled employees yung mga nandito. So, a corporation may be managed by team professionals hired to oversee the daily operation of the firm, di ba? So, these managers are more likely to be specialists sila in the areas of marketing, ayan, finance, accounting, and of course, the production. So, ito yung mga 5 advantages sa corporation. Okay? So, let's go to the disadvantages of corporation. So, number 1, ayan, tax liability. Corporations are taxed 30%. Ayan, imagine, 30% on their income, similar to that of partnership. So, ang corporation, 30% of their income, yung subject to tax. Okay? And we have also here the disadvantage number 2, legal requirements. Ayan, corporations are subject to government scrutiny more than the sole proprietor and partnership forms of business to protect the large number of investors. Siyempre, may mga investors yan na pwedeng baka naman naloloko lang tong corporation na to, 'di ba? So it is syempre binabantayan 'yan ng Securities and Exchange Commission, okay? So, corporations have to file for approval not only their articles of incorporation but also the corporate bylaws, ayan, to the Securities and Exchange Commission, of course, ayan. They are also required to file periodically their financial reports, ayan, stock sales, exchanges, and reacquisition, as well as business ventures, mergers, and acquisitions have to be approved by the SEC. So, even corporation requiring rehabilitation must submit at the SEC rehabilitation or remedial measures for approval. Ayan. So, that is the legal requirements under the corporation. So, mahirap i-accomplish yung mga legal requirements kung if you are going to engage in a corporation business. Okay? And number 3, we have here the lack of control. So, shareholders have no direct or active control of over the affairs of the corporation as they are not all directly involved in its daily operation. Siyempre, bilang isang shareholders, wala ka namang pakialam dun. Or hindi ka masyadong wala kang masyadong alam dun sa corporation. So, ang alam mo lang bumili ng stocks, ayan, at palaguin. So, yun lang naman. So, only those who are designated as board of directors or officers have direct influence over company policies or operation, unlike in a partnership where the partners were all active manager unless one is limited partner, di ba? Unlike sa partnership kasi, di ba, they are all active partners. Ano lang kung may limited ba partner sila, 'di ba? So sa corporation, kapag shareholders hindi ka masyado sa wala kang masyadong alam sa kumpanya, 'di ba? Kung sa kumpanya, okay? Only the board of directors yung may alam and officers yung may alam dun sa corporation, okay? Now, let's go to the corporate structure. So, when we say corporate structure, ayan, ito na yon. Another attribute of a corporation making it different from partnership, it's yung structure niya. So, kapag sinabi nating ownership, sila yung mga shareholders, policy makers, sila yung mga board of directors. Kapag manager, si president yan. So, under the president, meron dito yung vice president for marketing, vice president for production, vice president for finance, vice president for human resources. Okay? And we have here sino ba yung mga corporators natin? Syempre, ito yung mga owners of the corporation. So, they are called the shareholders in a stock corporation and have a right to elect. Ayan, may right sila na mag-elect sa mga board of directors. So, they are called members kapag hindi non-stock, kapag non-stock corporation and have a right to elect board of trustees. Okay, the founders of corporation are called, ayan, kapag founders ka ng isang corporation is incorporators. Okay? And these are original shareholders mentioned in the articles. Ayan, nakalagay dun sa articles of incorporation mo. Okay? So, kapag sinabi nilang, kapag founder ka sa corporation, you are incorporators. Nakalagay ka dun sa sinabmit ninyo na SEC. Dun sinabmit ninyo na articles of incorporation, sa SEC. Okay? Or sa Securities and Exchange Commission. So, take note that shareholders ang tawag natin pag stock corporation, and pag non-stock naman, sila yung mga members. Okay? So, these are the corporators. So, punta tayo sa the board of directors. So, sino naman sila? Yung sa board of directors. They are responsible for overall, supervision of the firm. So, on their shoulders rests the establishment of its goals and policies. They evaluate management performance and act on legal matters as well. Expansion programs, dividend declaration, introduction of new products, ayan. Entry in the new market, ventures, mergers, and consolidations are some problems na tinatakal ng mga board of directors natin. Okay? So, punta naman tayo dito sa president. So, the president and other officers. Ayan. So, other officers, yung sa babahin niya. Okay? Sa baba ni president. So, we have, they are responsible for, ayan, implementing the policies set up and the plans drawn by the board of directors. So, their function includes, ayan, purchasing, producing, selling, hiring, borrowing, and other functions necessary to operate the business. So, yun yung functions naman ni President. Okay? Now, let's go to kinds of corporation. Okay? So, we have here the private corporation, ayan, owned and organized for a private purpose or objective. So there are two kind of private corporation. We have here the stock corporation and the non-stock corporation. So when we say stock corporation, one which is privately owned by individuals or by some non-government units and is organized for a profit which is distributed as dividends to the owners. Kapag stock corporation yan. Okay, it is organized for a profit. Kapag non-stock corporation, such ayan mga religious sect natin, religious schools natin, non-stock profit, non-profit sila. So in a nature, therefore, no shares of stocks are distributed, nor there is dividend or profit distribution. Kasi non-profit organization sila. Like, say, for example, yung mga ABT schools natin. Diba? So that is a kind of corporation, and let's go now to the Corporation Code of the Philippines. The general law by and under whose authority corporations are created. So number 1, public corporation. So a government corporation organized for the accomplishment of its public functions such as the national government, provincial, city, or municipal government. So alam naman natin yan, public nga, di ba? Public corporation. So when we say closed corporation naman, a family corporation or one which is stock is held by a selected few and not open to any person. Lagaya ng mga yung dito sa atin, OCDC, ganun. It is called the privately held corporations kasi owned by a family lang. So it is closed corporation. And number 3, open corporation, one where the stock is listed in the stock market available for purchase. Ayan, so open corporation, meaning kung may pera ka, pwede kang mag-purchase ng stocks dyan by any person or entity. So it is also called a publicly held corporation. So open corporation. So yung mga pinagbibilhan nyo ng stocks, ayan, that's what we call open corporation. And let's go to kinds of stocks. So number 1, as to value. So under as to value, meron tayong tinatawag na par value stock and no par value stock. So when we say par value, ayan, excuse me, par value stocks, one which a fixed value stated in the certificate of corporation or the certificate of stock. And in the articles of incorporation, ayan, this serves as a minimum basis for the amount of contribution of a shareholder. Ayan. So, it means that the stock can be issued at par. Ayan, pwede siyang dun sa kung magkano yung i-issue ni corporation na per stock niya kung 100 pesos. Ayan. And above and above par value. Ayan, pwedeng maging 150. Ayan, but not below the par value, of course. So, it also serves as the basis for legal capital and therefore affords protection to the corporate creditors. So, recall that corporate creditors cannot demand payment out of personal assets of stockholders. Ayan, their claims are limited to the corporate assets lang nila. So, at liquidation point, claims of creditors are paid first out of the corporate assets. So, kapag yung mga nangutangan natin, nangutangan ni corporation, utang niya, so, una-una binabayaran nila dyan kapag nagli-liquidate sila yung mga creditors. Okay? So, sa par value stock, so pwede silang mag-issue base dun sa price na sinabi nila or yes, and above. Pwede nilang more than 100 yung pag-issue nila ng stocks, pero not below the par value na that was stated. Okay? And letter B, no par value stock. So, when we say no par value stock, one without as designated value stated in the stocks of certificate. So, wala siyang value, but it cannot be sold at less than, it cannot be sold as less than 5 pesos, syempre, as provided in the Corporation Code of the Philippines. So, the law, however, allows the board of directors or shareholders to fix the value at some later date. So, pwede nilang i-fix yung value. Okay? This stock is then called the non-par but with unissued value or stated value stock. So, according to Section 62 of the Corporation Code of the Philippines, further provides that all proceeds of no-par shares sold are considered legal. Ito na yun, we will discuss this later as legal capital. So, it should be noted that no-par shares are deemed fully and not accessible shares. So, madidiscuss natin yan mamaya sa legal capital, okay? And that is for as to value. So, paano naman pag as to right? So, we have here the common stock or the ordinary shares and the preferred stock or the preference shares. So, when we say common or ordinary, issued by the corporation by which entitles the owner to a pro rata dividend without any priority or preference over any stockholders. So, if only one kind stocks na ini-issue nila kapag yung ini-issue lang ng corporation is a common stock, ayan, is i-presume ba it is mas maganda kasi wala silang sinasabi na ito yung unahin natin, to preference natin, preferred, may mga preferred shares kasi sila. So, hindi yun pwede. So, if only one kind of stock is issued by the corporation, so ito na yung tinatawag nating common stock or ordinary shares. So, when we say preferred stock or preference shares, a class of stocks with preferential rights. So, meron silang rights or claims over the common stock. So, the most common preferential right is a priority claim over dividend. So, sila yung unang-unang nabibigyan ng dividend. So, preference share is usually issued at par value and the dividend rate is expressed as the percentage of the par value. Okay? So, ito na yung sinasabi natin kanina about sa legal capital. So, when we say legal capital, shareholders are not liable personally for the liabilities of the corporation. Sabi nga natin, di ba? They are only liable lang sila as to the extent of their shares. So, it means that the claims of the creditor can be satisfied only through the corporate asset, syempre. As a consequence, To protect the creditors, the law requires a minimum permanent investment by the shareholders. Ay, meron pala silang minimum permanent investment yung mga shareholders natin. So, this minimum permanent investment is called, ayan, legal capital. Ayan, cannot be distributed to the shareholders in the lifetime of the corporation. So, hindi pwedeng i-distribute i-distribute sa mga shareholders. Kasi legal capital niyan for the legal capital nga. Kasi 'di ba kapag ikaw na shareholders, hahabulin ka lang nila as to the extent of your shares. Paano naman yung mga creditors nila? Ayan, para naman maprotektahan yung mga creditors, may tinatawag silang minimum permanent investments, which is the legal capital, para kung papaano meron silang mampambayad dun sa pinagutangan nila kung insolvent na yung corporation or kung madedissolve na yung corporation. Okay? So, under the Section 2 of the Corporation Code provides that contributed capital of a corporation constitute a trust fund, ayan, to which the corporate creditors have a right for satisfaction of their claims. Ayan, yung sabi ko kanina. So, this is called the trust fund doctrine. So, ang legal capital is also called the trust fund doctrines. Okay? Investment at par value represents as legal capital. So, on the other hand, all proceeds from the issues of no par value shares are treated as legal capital. So, para maintindihan natin, basahin natin tong illustration. So, sa number 1 illustration, X Corporation issued 1,000 shares of stocks with a par value of 100. So, multiply mo yan, 100,000. Pero, in exchange of 120,000 cash. Okay? So, nag-issue daw si X Corporation ng 1,000 shares with a par value of 100. So, in exchange na babayaran nila yung cash, babayaran nila for 120 cash. So, although the total cash investment is 120, only 100,000 is considered as legal capital. Okay? Okay, so that is for the number 1. And number 2, X Corporation issued 1,000 shares at no par value stocks in exchange of 120,000 cash. So, ang legal capital mo dyan is 120,000. Okay, nakita natin yung difference between example 1 and 2. Okay, so yun about sa legal capital. Okay, let's go now to the rights of shareholders. So, number 1, right to share in the corporate profits at the discretion of the board of directors. Exempted from this right are the treasury shares. So, syempre, right to share in the corporate profits kung may profit sila. Okay? Number 2, right to vote and attend annual stockholders meeting. Exempted from the right to vote are preferred shares, redeemable shares, and treasury shares. So, kapag common stocks lang or common shares ka lang, so you and you are syempre bilang isang share, you are one of the shareholders. Ayan, ito yung mga rights mo. Pwede kang bumoto, pwede kang mag-attend ng annual stockholders meeting. Ayan. So, number 3, right to share in the distribution of assets upon liquidation of the business. Ayan. So, pwede kang mag-share sa mga assets nila upon the liquidation of the business. And number 4, right to purchase additional shares of stocks. Ayan. Pwede kang mag-purchase ng additional shares of stocks whenever there is an increase in the authorized capital stocks of the corporation. So, this is called now the preemptive rights. So, para mas maintindihan natin yung preemptive rights, let's have this example. Okay? let us assume that Santos is a shareholder. So, X Corporation owning 500 shares with a par value of 100. So, total share capital of the corporation is 20,000 shares. 20,000 shares or 2 million, di ba? His ownership over the corporation is 2.5 kasi nga 500 shares ka divide by 20,000. So 2.5 shares. So what will happen if the corporation decides to increase its share capital, which is mag 3 million? So to be able to maintain the original ownership, para 2.5% pa din yung share mo doon, to maintain the original ownership of the corporation, Santos as well as the shareholders will be given, pwede silang will be given a priority to buy additional shares of stocks para ma-maintain nila yung 2.5%. If Santos does not exercise his right, his ownership over the corporation will become 1.6 kasi nga tumaas na yung magiging yung share capital na lang sa corporation is 3 million, di ba? So what will happen if he buys 250 shares more? Then his ownership will still be 2.5%. Okay? Kasi bumili na naman siya ng 250 shares. So ang shares na niya doon is 750 shares. Divide by 30,000 na kasi ito naging 3 million na nga yung share capital nila, di ba? So that is a preemptive right na sinasabi natin, okay? And let's go to the incorporation requirements. Excuse me. Ayan, the law permits any number of natural people not less than 5 and not more than 15. Ayan, so pwede ka nang makapag-form ng private corporation. Not less than 5, so at least 5 persons and not more than 15. Diba? They must be of legal age, majority of them residents of the Philippines. So under the section 10 of the Corporation Code. Okay, number 2, at least 25% of the authorized capital stock, as stated in the articles of incorporation, must be subscribed. Ayan. And at least 25% of the subscription must be paid, mabayaran. So this is under the section 13 of the Corporation Code. So the Corporation Code does not mention any minimum authorized number of shares for as long as the paid up capital is not less than 5,000. Okay? Okay, para mas maintindihan natin, let's have this illustration. Okay, assume that the authorized capital stock is 2 million, then 25% of 2 million is 500,000 must be subscribed. Okay, and 25% of that 500,000 is 125 pesos must have been paid. Ayan, kailangan mabayaran. So, where the stock is no par and then the base of the computation of the total number of authorized and subscribed shares, the subscribed no par shares are considered fully paid up shares. Ayan. So, that is the example. Ayan, let's go to the articles of incorporation. Ayan, so a corporation should file its articles of incorporation with the Securities and Exchange Commission or yung SEC na sinasabi natin, duly signed and acknowledged by all incorporators and containing substantially the following information. So number 1, ayan, ano ba yung gusto mong pangalan ng corporation mo? Number 2, specific purpose for which the business was formed. Ano ba yung purpose mo? Okay, number 3, principal office of the corporation which must be, ayan, nasa Pilipinas. Yan, terms of existence of the corporation. And name, nationalities, and residence of the incorporator. Sino ba sila? number of incorporating directors who shall not less than 5 or more than 15. Okay? Names, nationalities, and residences of directors or trustees until the first regular directors or trustees are duly elected and qualified. In accordance with the Corporation Code. And number 8, for stock corporation, amount of authorized capital stocks in lawful money of the Philippines, number of shares into which it is divided. Ayan, the par value in case of par value, shares, names, nationalities, and residence of original subscribers, the amount subscribed and the payment made and if sum of all shares are without par, such fact that must be stated. So that is under the Article 14 of the Corporation Code. So sabi nito, lahat ng capital stocks in a lawful money of the Philippines. So yan. So, yun yung mga laman ng articles of incorporation mo na gagawin mo. So, 1 to 8 yan. Okay? Now, we have the Corporation Code under the Section 74 of the Corporation Code of the Philippines requires the keeping of the following books and records in the principal office. So, number 1, we have here the minutes of the stockholders meeting. Ayan, kailangan naka-keep dun sa records nila, sa corporate records nila. And letter B, we have here the minutes of directors meeting. Ayan. So, kailangan ng minutes of the meeting. Kailangan naka-compile lahat ng mga minutes of the meeting nila. Okay? Books of accounts where all business transactions are recorded. So, kailangan dyan. Letter D, stockholders ledger where shares issued for each stockholders are recorded. And letter E, subscribers ledger where subscription accounts for each subscriber is recorded. So, ayan yung mga corporate records na kailangan naka-update. Ayan, sa principal office ng isang corporation. Okay? And, ayan. So, anong pag sinabi nating authorized capital stock, ano yung meaning dito? So, ito yung, this represents the maximum number of shares or amounts the corporation may issue as stated in the Articles of Incorporation approved by the Securities and Exchange Commission. So, kapag authorized capital stocks, ito yung naka-state dun sa Articles of Incorporation nila. So, corporation shares provided in thereof may not issue more than the total number of shares provided in the article. So, hindi sila pwedeng mag-issue ng more than dun sa in-state nila sa Articles of Incorporation nila. Pero, pwede nilang palitan yun. Pwede nilang i-amend yung Articles of Incorporations nila para ma-approvean din nung SEC. Okay? And the stock subscription. So, when we say stock subscription, a subscription is an agreement to purchase a stock and states that the number of shares being subscribed. Ayan. So, the subscription price, term, payment, and call dates. So, in the absence of fixed call dates, payment is made upon call by the board of directors. So, agreement to purchase stocks. Okay? Capital stock. So, when we say capital stock, this represents the amount paid in the shareholder, whether in cash, property, or service, and for which a certificate of stock is issued as evidence of stock ownership. So, kapag nakabili ka na ng stock, bibigyan ka ng certificate of stock. Okay? And, ano ba yung certificate of stock na sinasabi natin? This is a written acknowledgement by the corporation of the stockholders' interest in the corporation and in net assets. So, the practice is to issue a certificate for a block of stocks, subscribed and fully paid for. Okay? A subscriber is not entitled to certificate unless he has, fully paid. So, saka lang i-issue yung certificate of stock sa'yo kung fully paid na yung binayaran mo. Let's say, for example, bumili ka ng shares of stocks, 1,000 at 100 pesos at par value of 100 pesos. So, magkano na yon? 1,000, 10,000, di ba? So, pero 5,000 pa lang yung binayaran mo, so that is mag-fall dun sa accounts receivable ng corporation, hindi ka pa nila i-issuehan ng certificate of stock. Not unless you are going to pay it in full. Then, saka lang sila mag-i-issue ng certificate of stock. Okay? And we have also here the organization cost. So, when we say organization cost, in organizing a corporation, certain costs have to be incurred such as yung mga professional fee of lawyers, accountants, and promoters, licenses, printing costs, and the like. So, yun yung mga costs na binabayaran ng corporation. So, these are called organization costs or pre-incorporation costs and are to be recorded as expenses. Ayan, expenses yan ng corporation. Stocks issuance expenses such as cost and printing of certificates, documentary stamps and filing and registration fees, and all other direct costs of selling stocks should be debited to the additional paid in capital. Ayan. So, otherwise, it's debited on the organization cost as expenses, di ba? And we have also the shareholders' equity. So, when we say shareholders' equity, while the owner's claim in partnership is called partner's equity. So, in a corporation, it is called the shareholders' equity. So, kapag partnership yan, partner's equity. Kapag corporation, shareholders' equity. Ayan. So, this represents the residual interest of the shareholders in the net assets of the corporation and may therefore express in an accounting equation. Ayan, asset is equal to liabilities plus shareholders' equity. So, hindi yun owner's equity or hindi yun partner's equity. It is the shareholders' equity. Okay? And the shareholders' equity is divided into two parts. So we have here the contributed or paid in capital section representing the contributions or investment by the shareholders. So number 2, retained earnings section or accumulated profits section representing the profits, losses earned through the operation of the business. Ayan. So, kapag contributed or paid in capital, ito yung mga investment ng mga shareholders. Kapag retained earnings, ito yung mga accumulated profits nila na pwede nilang, that represents profit or losses, okay, through the operation of the business. Retained earnings ang tawag dyan. Okay? So, unlike sa sole proprietor or partnership capital accounts, Title 4 individual shareholders are not maintained for two reasons. So, number 1, the number of shareholders involved, which could reach 100. The constant transfer of shares of stocks from one investor to another, diba? So, hindi sila makapag-maintain ng makapag-maintain ng individual account titles kasi ang dami ng marami yung shareholders nila, and of course yung hindi constant transfer of shares, yung basta-basta na lang yung binenta ko na lang yung shares of stocks ko na hindi alam ng mga ng corporation, di ba? So yun yung kung bakit sila hindi makapag-maintain ng account titles for individual shareholders. Okay? Now, let's go to the ownership structure in business organization. So, kapag sole proprietor yan, kapag ayan, ang capital, yung contribution niya, ang ang drawing, kung may drawing siya, withdrawals profit. Under the partners naman, ayan, ganito yung style. And kapag sa stockholders or sa corporation, ito yon, share capital contributions at par, magkano ba? And of course, meron tayong tinatawag na share premium, excess yun sa contribution mo. And accumulated profits, so kung may dividends ka, periodic profit. Okay? Now, let's go to accounting for shares of stocks. So, the transactions involving the shares of stocks are as follows. So, number 1, we have here the authorization. So, when we say authorization, recording of the maximum number of share corporation is authorized to issue as stated in the articles of or incorporation. So, kapag sinabi nating authorizations, ito lang yung pwedeng shares, pwedeng stocks, shares of stocks ng isang corporation kasi nakasulat doon sa articles and incorporation nila. So, this is called authorized share capital or authorized capital stocks. Okay? And we have here also the sales. So, when shareholder buys, pag yung shareholder is bumili or nagbayad, immediately in full, the shares are considered sold and a stock certificate is issued, syempre, di ba? So, these shares are called share capital. And number 3, subscription. A subscriber enters into a contract to buy a number of shares, pero nag-down payment siya. Ayan, down payment is required with the balance payable on a fixed date or upon the call of yung mga board of directors natin. So, the shares are called, ayan, subscribed share capital. So, kapag sales nila, kapag they paid in full, share capital ang tawag doon. Kapag hindi nila binayaran in full, subscribe share capital. Okay? And number 4, we have also the collection of subscription. So, the subscription may be paid by the shareholders in cash, property, or in the form of service. So, collection of subscription. So, pwede nilang bayaran ng cash, property, or form of service. And number 5, we have also the issuance of certificate. So, once the subscription is collected in full, saka ka lang bibigyan ng certificate of stock. Okay? And we have also the reacquisition of shares. Ayan, the issuing corporation may reacquire, purchase, or redeem, ayan, the shares of stocks which were originally issued with the intention of either reselling or retiring them in the near future. So, reacquisition of shares. So, pwede mo siyang bumili ulit ng shares of stocks mo. Okay? Ayan, tignan natin yung movement of stocks natin or yung movement of stocks. So, corporation to shareholder authorized kapag nakabenta ka and na-issue na. 'Di ba? Kapag yan, authorized share capital, shares of stocks, nag-subscribe ka, binayaran mo in full, and nakakolek ka, nag-issue sila ng certificate of stock. Okay? And number 3, reacquired either to be resold or retired. Ayan, nag-issue sila ng certificate of stock. Okay? The following are terms commonly used to describe the stocks as regarding their movement. So, kapag sinabi nating authorized shares, maximum number of shares ng corporation na pwede nilang i-issue. Okay? Kapag issued shares, ito na yung fully paid shares ng as evidence by the issuance of stock certificate. In-issue muna yan kay shareholder. Okay? Kapag subscribed shares purchased by investor subject to installment payment. Ayan, yan yung subscribed shares. Hindi mo siya nabayaran in full. So, saka ka lang bibigyan ng certificate of stock kapag nabayaran mo na siya in full. Okay? Kapag naman treasury shares, issued but reacquired by the corporation and no longer, hindi na siya outstanding. Okay? Outstanding shares issued and still held by the shareholders. Okay? So, yun yung mga commonly terms regarding the stocks movement. And we have also here the account, the title used for stock transaction. Okay? We are now in our last topic. Okay? Ayan. So, when we say share capital naman, so this account is credited when a stock certificate is issued for the total shares collected. Ayan. So, at the par value. So, if the stock is a par value stock, if the stock is a par value stock, so share capital yan. If the stock is no par, this account is credited to the total amount collected. Okay? Subscription receivable. Ayan, this is an account title is debited at the subscription price based on the number of shares subscribed and credited when collected, syempre. So, this is a current asset kasi receivable mo siya, pinautang mo, yan collectible within 1 year. So, kapag walang, if there is no call date, it is treated as a contra stockholders equity account and to be deducted from yung mga subscribed share capital nila to arrive at a paid-in capital, okay? And number 3, subscribed share capital. So, this account is credited, credited yan for the total par value of the shares subscribed and debited when a stock is issued. Ayan. After subscription has been paid in full. Ayan. So, letter D, share premium. This account is credited for contributions in excess of, ayan, the par value. So, ito yung sinasabi nating share premium. Let's say, for example, 1,000 na shares times binili mo siya at 100. So, magkano yan? Magkano yon? So, 10,000. Pero, ang binayaran mo, 12,000. So, ang share, yung 2,000 mapupunta siya sa share premium. Okay? And, number 2, letter E, treasury shares. So, this account is debited for shares purchased by the corporation from the shares it has originally issued out. Okay? Yung na-issue noon na shares pero kinuha na ni company, so ito na yung tinatawag nating treasury shares. Yan. So in the shareholders equity section, the contributed capital is classified further into 2. Paid-in capital section, where the share capital and subscribed share capital are presented, and additional paid-in capital. Yun yung share premium natin representing payment in the excess of a par or stated value is presented. Okay? Take note that payments in excess of par are not stated as legal capital. Okay? So, hindi yan, yung share premium is hindi yun legal capital. Okay? Okay, we reached the end of our lesson, our topic. Let's go now to your requirements. So, sa requirements ninyo, ayan, case analysis problem lang naman, okay? So, basahin yung case analysis. And number 2, essay, answer each of the following in 5 to 10 sentences. Ayan yung mga question, okay? So, yan yung requirements ninyo sa lesson na 13 for partnership, corporate, and corporate accounting, okay? If you have any queries, mag-message lang kayo sa akin sa messenger, okay? And, bye-bye and God bless us.